So with the NFL offseason fully underway, we have a couple months to speculate constantly of what players going where, what players going to get drafted, and so forth up until late April when the 2024 NFL draft is underway in Detroit. One of the biggest storylines is Justin Fields. What's going to happen with him? And this is more so because of the Bears obviously having the number one overall pick. Many people, including myself, believe that they will move off of Fields and go with presumably Caleb Williams at the top spot. So now it moves to who's going to trade for Fields. Now, what the compensation, what they're going to get in return, that's a whole other story. I don't know what they're going to get in return. I don't feel like it's going to be a first round pick, or if it is, it's going to be a late first pick. I'm going to guess it's going to be somewhere around maybe the second round range, or maybe a couple, second round plus something else on top of that. But that's that's a different discussion for a different day. We're going to be talking about at least destinations where you can go to. And you see, posted by a few days ago by JPA Football, he posted what DK Sportsbook has as of their betting favorites, and they have the Pittsburgh Steelers at the number one spot to land Justin Fields in this offseason, followed by Chicago, staying in Chicago, Atlanta, New England, Denver, Washington, and the Raiders. And I see a lot of people say the Pittsburgh Steelers is a top spot, which offhand looks like a great spot, no doubt. First and foremost, organization-wise, definitely one of the best in the NFL, stable. You look at Mike Tomlin, the longest tenure head coach in the NFL right now, since Belichick has been fired, and Pete Carroll as well. And also, to the top of that, never had a losing season in the NFL. And now we look at, break down the teams. They still have an elite defense, and more importantly, they have a great offensive talent around them. Decent offensive line. That is kind of the weak spot of this offensive side, is just the offensive line. They can definitely do much better, but it's not horrible. But more importantly, is just the weapons. Overall, by far, this is the best talent he would have around him if he does go to the Steelers. George Pickens, Deontay Johnson, Calvin Austin III, Freiermuth, Najee Harris, Darren Warren. That collection of talent is no doubt, I think, good enough to help Justin Fields and elevate him even more. Could they add one more piece if he lands in Pittsburgh? Maybe they add something in the draft. Absolutely. But just like an offhand, it is a great talent all around and a great team overall for him to land. But I made my own top 5 list, and I don't have the Steelers in any of that top 5. The big reason why is, and it's gonna look dumb because, at least for my top 5, because there's gonna be much worse teams overall than the Steelers on here. My biggest concern is their new offense coordinator, Arthur Smith, and what he has, or more importantly, what he hasn't been able to do. The big thing I look at is the head coaching job in Atlanta. 3 seasons there, 3 straight 7-10 seasons, especially last season when he had a young elite talent with up and coming, potentially elite talent, I should say, with Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, and Drake London. And there was many times throughout the season that those people did not show up. The biggest one obviously being Kyle Pitts, another disappointment in his 3rd year. But also, too, the big one is rookie Bijan Robinson, where there was many times where he did not feature him in games. He gave Aguilar more carries over him, and they had the infamous one where, I think early on in the season, where he started, didn't show, he was on their injury report, nothing listed, and then they decided to pull him out of the game. Didn't play at all. And of course, they were under investigation for that. I don't remember offhand if something did happen to them. I think if they did, it was a fine, but he was pulled because he was feeling sick. But there was no reports of that at all. And again, just the mismanagement of just great talent on that side, on the offensive side, the great young players they have, it did not work out. And then you look at the resume in Tennessee as OC, nothing too special there. Not really a genius one. The play calling is essentially just giving Derrick Henry the ball 20 or 30 times. And I feel like if Justin Fields goes there, this will probably hinder him a little bit and maybe kind of hold him back. Not with him, but the other players as well, with George Pickens and Freiermuth and Najee Harris. I worry for all those guys on that side, because I don't feel confident in Arthur Smith. So that's why I have him outside my top 5 list. And we're going to be looking at just now to my top 5 list. So my top 5 list is number 1, the Atlanta Falcons. Number 2, Minnesota Vikings. Number 3, New England. Number 4, the Giants. And number 5, the Raiders. So quickly, I'm going to go through each of them. The Raiders. This is now. If this was still Josh McDaniels, they would not be on the list. the person that's overrated in my opinion. So thankfully they moved off of him. But newly hired full-time head coach Antonio Pierce, I love what he's doing there. Definitely has really revived that team. I think definitely just the energy there. It's different. They played a lot different once he took over. The biggest one I think it really jumps out is just the Kansas City game where Aiden O'Connell did not have a completion after the first quarter, and they still somehow won at Kansas City. I think you should really. That's I think a really highlight of that game or the games that he was a head coach under that season. And I think overall, again, I think the team responded really well under him. They loved him. They wanted to bring him back, especially Max Crosby was one. Where there was speculation that if he was not hired, that he would demand a trade. And for me, at least, I think they made the right choice of keeping him and giving him at least a shot to be the full-time head coach. This is a spot where I definitely can see him go. The other part of it, too, is the quarterback situation. We just saw Jimmy Garoppolo get suspended 2 games, and with that, it potentially voids the guarantee money. Could that be the final step of just letting go of Jimmy Garoppolo, who had a very lackluster year, to say the least, in his first season at Las Vegas? Yeah, did not play well. I think he can do much better. Aiden O'Connell was definitely not the answer there as well. He played okay at times, but again, not the answer. Justin Fields would be a great spot here. The only concern I have is just the uncertainty with the pieces around them, especially with Josh Jacobs. It looks most likely they're not going to franchise tag him again. Could they get a long-term extension done? I don't know. The other one too is just Devontae Adams, just because he's getting up there in age. But I would feel that it would draw those players to stay if they could in Las Vegas if they had someone like Justin Fields, because I think these guys really, I think overall, I think a lot of players around the league like Fields, especially his play style, being a dual threat quarterback, and we'll get to that in a second, breaking down his stats after the top 5. I think he can really pair up really well with the Raiders if he can still have Josh Jacobs, who is still one of the best running backs in the NFL, and do well with Devontae Adams, which last year he had a great wide receiver in DJ Moore, first year there, and put up great stats. So it would be no problem with the whole speculation of if the connection between Adams and Fields would work. I think overall it would be a great pairing for the team, and also too they have a good defense as well. So number 4 is the Giants. The only reason why I have the Giants above the Raiders is solely because of Brian Daboll, because his offensive mind and him probably being able to try and mold them into Josh Allen. We saw the success that he had under with Josh Allen, how phenomenal, and what especially cutting the turnovers down. It hasn't worked out with Daniel Jones. He tried to mold him into the next Josh Allen, and he's just not that. He's just not that good of a quarterback. This is definitely an upgrade for Brian Daboll, a much better dual threat, much more bigger threat, especially with his legs as opposed to Daniel Jones. Throwing wise, I think it's again he has no problem, and we'll get into this the throwing part aspect of it in a second when we break down the stats. But I think this would be a great pairing. The only thing they would have to really do is just really be hell bent this year on really bringing pieces in around them. Darren Waller was a small step last year. Didn't really do too much this past season, but again, it's a small stepping stone. They're going to have to add more pieces around Justin Fields, whether it's free agency or the draft. But I think this would be a stable franchise quarterback that I think the Giants can move forward with, and I think this can really open the creativity for Brian Daboll in the playbook and really, definitely show the Brian Daboll of the Buffalo Bills as opposed to what it's been this past season, especially with kind of being handicapped with, you could say, with Daniel Jones or whoever. I think this would be a huge upgrade and a huge benefit for Brian Daboll and the Giants for this one. Number 3 is the New England Patriots. Same thing too. They have the 3rd overall pick. If you do land Justin Fields, you don't have to worry about a quarterback at 3rd overall, which we presumably believe it could either be Drake May or Jaden Daniels, depending on how that order goes. If Caleb Williams goes 1st overall. But for that one, if you with a 3rd overall pick, if you do land Justin Fields, you immediately get a playmaker from. You definitely draft Marvin Harrison Jr. at that 3rd overall pick spot. You immediately get him his number 1 target, number 1 wide receiver at that mark. You still have Stevenson in New England at the backfield. Definitely a great running back in my opinion. Definitely one of the better dual threat running backs, receiving and catching. I think at times a little bit underrated as well. Had a rough season this past year along with everyone else in the offense, but definitely, once again, with Justin Fields being there in a new direction, no longer Belichick being there, I do have a little bit more confidence of that things are going to start slowly going to the modern day thinking of how teams are built, how GMs think, and so forth in the minds of the philosophy. So if this was under Bill Belichick, I wouldn't recommend New England Patriots because of just how stubborn he is and trying to stay in the old ways. But with Jerome Mayo, maybe it could be in a different direction with that. And again, if you get Justin Fields with this one, you immediately land Marvin Harrison Jr. with the first overall pick. And that's just stopping there. They could probably add much more in the draft or in free agency as well, surrounding Justin Fields. So that is definitely a great spot for him potentially if he goes there. Number 2 is the Minnesota Vikings, and this one is going to be a little bit tricky because we do have the Justin Fields contract coming up soon on top of Justin Fields. So, again, Justin Jefferson's contract and Justin Fields, it's going to be a lot of money because we at least for me, I'm speculating that Justin Fields will get around for extension-wise if he can play well this season wherever he goes, around the $40 million range. I think it's a solid offer. I think it's a good offer for both sides. I don't think he's going to be getting top dollar money, 50 plus million. I think somewhere maybe like 40, 45 million, maybe a little bit more on the higher end of the 40s, but I think overall around the $45 million range, I think it's a solid offer for Justin Fields. And we'll have to see what the Justin Jefferson contract is as well. There's also reports saying he wants to see what the quarterback is with that future. And the other one too is just not knowing where Kirk Cousins is gonna go. Is he gonna stay in with Minnesota? Is he gonna go elsewhere? But I think if you land Justin Fields there, just the talent that they have around them, especially I think by far that's probably rivals the Falcons, if not better. I think you could definitely say it's much better overall pieces with Justin Jefferson at the wide receiver 1, Jordan Addison the wide receiver 2, TJ Hockenson the tight end spot. Running backs are gonna have to figure that out. Wasn't too impressed with Madison this year, but I think they can again add someone through free agency or in the draft, get a much cheaper deal or better running back on a cheaper contract. But overall, I think that is definitely a amazing spot, and you could definitely argue it should be number 1. But again, because of the contract issues coming up with Justin Jefferson, it does worry me a little bit with that. And finally, number 1, I do have the Atlanta Falcons, just solely because of just on cheaper deals, still on rookie contracts. Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson. These are phenomenal. There's a phenomenal trio to have around Justin Fields who could definitely excel with the dual threat aspect of him. Along with, I think he can really. I think Bijan Robinson can absolutely benefit and definitely be one of the top running backs in the NFL, pairing up alongside with Justin Fields' legs. Drake London, definitely a big body wide receiver from 6'5", could definitely get contested balls in the air. And more importantly, I think he can really revive Kyle Pitts' career. Ever since his first year where he went over 1,000 yards, made the Pro Bowl in his rookie year, it's been downward the last 2 seasons. Very lackluster, especially this year when people thought he was going to have a bounce-back season in his 3rd year after a disappointing sophomore season. Once again, a definitely disappointing season in his 3rd year. I think he can really bounce back if he has a quarterback like Justin Fields. Desmond Ridder, unfortunately, just did not work out. Overall, an okay quarterback, but it just goes back to the 2022 class with just very lackluster playing from the quarterback class. Justin Fields, no doubt, is a huge upgrade. No one can argue with that over Desmond Ridder, and I think he would help revive Kyle Pitts' career along with benefiting everyone else and that one as well. So getting to the stats for Justin Fields, and people will go back and forth. Is he a franchise quarterback? Is he a good quarterback or not? I think he is. We look at the stats, it's trending upward. Now his career stats aren't that flashy, having especially in the touchdown interception ratio for 40 touchdowns, 30 interceptions. He also has 8 fumbles in his career, 4 lost. He has over 6,000. He just has under 6,700 passing yards. And then we go for the rushing. Already has 2,200 rushing yards, 14 touchdowns. And I really want to highlight 2022 for this aspect because of mainly the dual threat and what he was able to do with really no talent around him. This was before DJ Moore came on the team. So in 2021, in 15 games, he had 2,200 passing yards, 17 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. Not too impressive, but once you get to the rushing stats, it's insane. He had over 1,100 rushing yards and 8 touchdowns. If he didn't miss that last game, I truly believe he breaks Lamar Jackson's record for most rushing yards by a quarterback in a season. And this is the potential. This is what he can offer. And I don't want to jump and put him in that the category of calling him the next. He could be another Lamar Jackson because we already know what he's accomplished, 2-time MVP and so forth. But he can be something similar to that, where he can be a great dual threat. Another one is Jalen Hurts. He can be something like that for another team. Again, the Atlanta Falcons, Minnesota Vikings, New England Patriots, wherever he goes. So a team that's really going to open the playbook and allow him to use both his arms and his legs, especially because you saw in 2022 what he was capable of. He can definitely be a dual threat, one of the better dual threat quarterbacks in the NFL. Again, he can be somewhere similar to Jalen Hurts or Lamar Jackson, at least their version of Lamar Jackson. Last year was a tad bit better, especially for the interception mark. 2,500 passing yards, the most he's had in his career. 16 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. He also had 657 rushing yards, 4 touchdowns to add on that. And he's improving, especially with his accuracy. That was a big concern that a lot of people had, was his completion percentage. It's gone up slowly. First year 58.9, second year 60.4, and this past season 61.4. So he's trending upward. He's improving, especially his QBR going from 73.2 to 85.2 to 86.3. So he's trending upward. He's getting better and better each year, especially getting closer to a contract extension, which you want to see. You want to see him improving, and no doubt, I think he is worth the money, depending on where he goes. Especially where I listed with the top two, especially Atlanta and Minnesota. I think he can definitely have amazing success there, and no doubt once he gets there, he makes those teams playoff contenders. If not, depending on how he plays and how the team responds, it might sound crazy, might sound ridiculous to say, especially in the NFC for those two. He might kind of push them to Super Bowl contenders, at least rivaling to win the NFC entirely. I know it might sound crazy to say because we're talking about Justin Fields, but I do think he has a capability. I do think if you give him the talent around him, like those top two teams I said with Atlanta and Minnesota, he can definitely, I think, he can do tons of damage. He can definitely, put the NFL on notice what he can do. Now, finally, the last part is just the contract aspect, and that's probably the more important thing is the money. So he is on his final deal before the guaranteed year before the 5th-year option, just making $6 million, and then he has a 5th-year option after that, and then 2026 he will be a unrestricted free agent. That's where the big money is going to come in. So apologize to have 2 more years under contract, which I think has plenty of time to prove if he's worth that money. And by the time he gets there, who knows? Maybe he outplays the money I say at $45 million. Maybe he plays phenomenal and he starts inching closer to the $50 million range or the $55 million range. We don't know what the NFL landscape is going to look like by the time it hits 2026, but it all depends on how he plays. If he plays decent, maybe he probably gets the $40 million. But if he plays the way I think he can, especially on those top 2 teams I listed, for the Atlanta, Minnesota, and he really excels the way I think he does, he definitely is going to push that ceiling a lot higher than $45 million. But that's definitely going to be the big aspect for any team, is they have 2 more years to know what he is. If it was 1 more year before his 5th-year option, or if this upcoming year was his 5th-year option, I would definitely be a little bit worrisome, because it's a lot to think about. It's a lot to try and wonder what you're going to do, especially if it was his 5th-year deal, because is there going to be pressure to get a contract done before you even see him step on the field and play for you? Or is it going to be a very ugly situation after the season where you're trying to figure out a deal, you have to franchise tag him? But I think with him having at least 2 more years on his deal, this upcoming season, the year after, and not even counting the 5th-year option, I think this is definitely an amazing investment for somebody. And with the return, again, I don't expect a huge return or huge asking price for Justin Fields. Maybe it is when we get closer to the NFL draft. I don't see a huge price tag for Justin Fields to acquire him. And I think it even makes it even better. I think it's, again, at most you might have to give up a late 1st-round pick if you're one of those teams towards the end, like at the Pittsburgh Steelers. But I think it's a huge invest. I think it's a great gamble. You get a young quarterback still at 24 years old, with 2 more years, or essentially 3 years on his contract still, and can show you, and it is definitely a huge upgrade over someone has. Even though I try and still be a Kenny Pickett fan, I would much rather take Justin Fields over Kenny Pickett, along with the other teams I have listed. I think he could be a phenomenal quarterback, if given the talents around him, and I keep saying I think he can put the NFL on notice if he can truly thrive on a team that's really gonna really be supportive and actually build around him. But that's kind of my thoughts on it. Again, this is my top 5 list for Justin Fields to land: Vegas, Giants, Patriots, Vikings, and Falcons.